Hello and welcome to Yes Sir I Can Brewery episode 4, I believe. I'm Robbie Knox and I'm joined as always by my business partner and lover, Michael Miller. How are you, Mike?
I'm good, thank you. I think that makes us, now we've gone into business together, we're like life partners. Our lives are just inextricably intertwined. It's quite romantic.
Wonderful, wonderful. It is romantic,
Say wonderful like you mean it.
No, it's wonderful. It's a thing of beauty, absolute beauty. Since we last saw everyone, the S43 collab has continued to sell. There's a few cans of that available if you want to get there. Get to the S43 website, s43brewery.com. It was on tap at the Murderers in Norwich, Jamie's Happy Hour's favourite pub, and that was all gone on draft in 3 days. You had to be quick to get hold of that. We're gone by the weekend. So, yes, that's all done. Mike, should we have a quick little look into your sack?
Absolutely. The weekly delve into my bag. So loads of people got in touch with us to say congratulations on the beer, to say they like the beer, so thank you so much. We read all these comments, we try to get back to everyone we can. Just a few of these lovely messages. Alex Mack says new favourite beer, every aspect spot on, and considering it's our second release, we completely smashed it. So I'm looking down because we're a digital brewery, but I've written all this down on a piece of paper.
How retro.
They're very retro, cool that way. Sam Howard, great effort, loved it, thanks Sam. Pete said they're both really nice. He thinks he prefers Pacific Days, 10 out of 10. Now I think Pacific Days is edging it, don't you think?
I prefer Pacific Days out of the two of them, but other people don't. Other people prefer the other one, so it's both popular, I would say.
Just a few more. Billy Moss said, this is unbelievable, coming from a marker pen IPA bottle to this. You guys have smashed it. Thank you very much, Billy. And, well, I mean, there's lots more where that came from. Thank you so much, everyone.
Essentially, lots of people say nice things.
Yeah, lots of things say nice things. And, special shout out to Ellie, who sent pictures of her cat playing in the delivery box, which then made it into our newsletter. So it is now Luna, the 12-year-old black cat, something of a mascot for Bin Day Brewery now. Finally,
how's your newsletter going? Oh, go on.
Oh, one thing. This is blatant opportunism. George Gibbs writes to us and says, "Are you selling those snazzy Bin Day T-shirts?"
Yeah, well, actually, the white T-shirts, the Bin Day T-shirts, are on sale. The black T-shirts will be on sale once I can get them modelled, which is proving difficult because I can't take photos of myself, and I'm the most obvious male model around. So yes, the white ones are on sale, bindaybrewing.com.
Yay, and that is the sack. The sack has been emptied all over the internet, and that is it for now.
A very praise-filled sack from you today, Michael.
It's a feel-good sack.
It is a feel-good sack. Today we are chatting with an old friend. We're going to be chatting with a man called Jim Mather, who we met in Norwich many years ago at the University of East Anglia. He is a seventh-generation lawyer who decided not to follow into the family tradition of law. Went to the US 18 to work in a winery, worked for Majestic for a bit, joined Moet Hennessy, very luxury, much like us. Worked out there in United Arab Emirates for quite a long time. Did a bit of consulting in the past. Helped create an R&B hip-hop nightclub restaurant type thing in the past. Worked for Remy Cointreau as well, back in the UK. Working more whiskey and stuff like that, and now also has his own distillery and a mead production thing. So an expert on booze and an expert on international booze, would you say, Mike?
I would do, and I could just like to point out that what a massive inspiration Jim should be for everyone starting out, because Jim, who lived with us and knew us at university, was the only man I've ever heard of who had to go for physiotherapy because he played PlayStation so much that he damaged his neck looking at the television.
Wow,
so it's safe to say our initial relationship didn't. Yeah, initial relationship didn't promise the kind of career that he went on to have.
Wonderful. Okay, without further ado, let's get on to our chat with Jim Mather. Jim, welcome. First things first, Mike, in the intro that we just did before you arrived here, mentioned that you are the only person we know who's had to have physio from playing PlayStation too much on the sofa. Have you fully recovered from your PlayStation injuries?
Not quite. It's a long-lasting issue that I developed at university.
Wonderful. You're a not a beer newcomer like us. You've spent years in the alcohol industry, haven't you? Do you want to give us a very, I know we've roughly touched on things, but essentially travelling the world selling booze, making booze,
that's right.
variety of booze-related stuff. Yeah.
When I left school, before going to university, took a year out, wrote off to 150 wineries around the world. Got 4 responses, one of which was the offer of a job. So I went off to America, worked for basically did a season in a cellar making wines for a winery called Geyser Peak. So not old enough to drink, but old enough to make wines. And then it was a case of, what do I do next? 18 years old, didn't really know what I wanted to do. I come from a long line of lawyers. My dad is a 7th generation lawyer. So I basically kind of joined you guys at Norwich University, did law, and after 3 years of law decided that the last thing that I wanted to do was to go into the legal kind of profession. So decided that was it. I was going to continue following the booze route. And I was advised to join, I think like a lot of people at the time, to join Majestic Wines, because at the time it was kind of like their graduate scheme was the best introduction into the industry. After 4 years of that, and it was very much dead men's boots, there were so many people waiting for management positions, there wasn't really anywhere to go. And it just so happened that it was another of our housemate's wedding over in Australia, so Mike and I decided to do a road trip over to Melbourne, and I ended up staying for a year and working out in the Hunter Valley again at a winery. So really I started off in wines.
So did you...
Go on.
I was going to say, did you always want to work in alcohol? Because it's quite an interesting thing to decide you want to do at 18 when you're probably relatively new to drinking, and most people say you don't have an appreciation of wine at the age of 18. Do you know what I mean? Was it something you're always interested in? What made you go into and write to lots of wineries to go for a job?
I guess it was not really knowing what I wanted to do at the age of 18, and I guess that my grandfather, my father, they've always been into wines. My grandfather was a massive snob in terms of the champagnes or the wines that he drank. So I'd grown up being around wines, and it was something that I found quite interesting. I used to do homebrew when I was kind of 16, 17, just kind of playing around. So at that point, it was just something that intrigued me. My dad at the time said there was no chance that I was just going to take a year out and spend it doing nothing, and he wanted me to work. So, so to be honest, it was an adventure.
Wonderful. Then after the early wine days, you went travelling around the Middle East, wasn't it?
Well, yeah. So before that, so when I came back from Australia, I joined Moet Hennessy. So kind of Hennessy, Moet Chandon, Dom Perignon. I ran the northwest for them, which basically was from the north of Birmingham to Oldham, and then all of North Wales. So I was their business development BDE for the northwest. So for that, it was dealing with bars, clubs, restaurants, very much kind of a sales role. And then from there, I then moved out to the Middle East, to Dubai, and I worked for one of the big importers there, eventually as the brand manager for the spirit, for Moet Hennessy Spirit. So I was Hennessy brand manager, Belvedere, Glenmorangie as well. So that was really interesting for me because, yeah.
No, sorry, I don't want to interrupt. Just before you get any further along that journey, how the experience of that must be so different. I imagine hawking booze to the Ritzies in Oldham. Slightly different experience to shifting it to some 6-star hotel in the Emirates.
Yeah, to be honest, at that point in my career, I'd gone from, well, first of all, I was in making the product, then through Majestic Wines, I was retail, and then when I went to the Moet Hennessy, then it was business to business, and so it was for that, there was a completely different mindset of selling as well. So from that point, dealing with nightclub owners in Liverpool and dealing with nightclub owners in Dubai, pretty similar mindset. In Dubai, you learn to, obviously because it's a Muslim country, you have to be incredibly respectful about the position that you hold and where you are, because it's obviously you're dealing with something which is very controversial over there, and we did get a lot of Saudis, a lot of Wahhabis who were very, very against any alcohol being within the region, but on the other hand, you had a lot more, let's say, more people who are open to alcohol and consuming alcohol. But yeah, it's I've always had it, whether it be Manchester, whether it be Oldham, whether it be Dubai, I dealt with the places where we would be drinking Dom Perignon, and the places where it's there could be strip clubs, there could be dodgy little bars, or there could be working men's clubs. I basically dealt with the whole breadth of the industry.
Was your experience a bit like being in a Guy Ritchie film? Did you have lots of random people who were slightly scary?
God, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, and even kind of in my role, kind of quite recently, at one stage I could be dealing with a 7-star hotel like the Burj Al Arab, and then the next you're talking to guys who are pretty much smugglers.
Right, so real mix.
Real mix, yeah.
A smorgasbord of people. There's obviously you touched on it there, that there's obviously a controversy around booze in the Middle East. Does it make it very difficult to do business internationally when you've got those sort of challenges?
You've always got to deal with the local legislation. It doesn't matter whether or not it's now, with my own distillery, the regulations that we have to have dealing with Spain, and the paperwork we have to fill out for that, as it is filling out paperwork for a Muslim country like Indonesia or for Dubai. Each country will have its laws and regulations that you have to follow. So I think one of the things that travelling really has taught me, though, is that you can't go into a mindset as this is the way it works in the UK, this is the way that it should be working everywhere else in the world. You have to be open to be very very entrepreneurial. You need to be very respectful of local tradition and local business practices. I've got friends who go into it and they're very, very arrogant and they're very, very demanding and they struggle. And I have other friends who are a little bit more, what would be the word? Probably a little bit more understanding in how local business works with the local customs, and so things are easier for them.
Wonderful. You then eventually went on to start your own distillery. How did that come about? What was the decision there, and how did you kick it all off?
So it started off, the whole idea started off in Dubai. So I've been working for Moet Hennessy for 8 years between the UK and the Middle East. Was getting a bit frustrated in terms of where everything was going. I had gone through sales, I'd gone through marketing, I'd gone through new product development, and so decided to leave them and to set up a consultancy company. And so with that, it was setting up F&B projects, so restaurants, nightclubs, but also looking at product development as well. At the time, was helping companies to build brands, and so my wife and I, we decided that we wanted to also do something for ourselves, and to set up our own brand. So we initially, I guess a bit like Binde Brewing, and because we were in the Middle East, and obviously we didn't have a distillery at the time, the initial run that we did for our product was through a European distillery, until we could actually kind of come back here and set up our own distillery and go through everything. So I guess it's similar to what you, kind of the way you're doing it at the moment, the way you did it through Docs and S43. We started off that way. So I learned Photoshop to design the label. My wife, she created the recipe, so she went back over to Lithuania to deal with the distillery themselves. She already had the recipe, but just in terms of getting that recipe right for the first run that we did.
And what was that recipe for?
That was for Apotheca Gin, which is basically, that's the core line that we now have from Honey Spirits. So we still use the recipe that we created kind of way back in 2016, but now everything is distilled here in the Peak District where we live.
How did you go about, first of all, when you decided you were going to deal with another distillery to create your first thing? Because that's sort of where we are at the minute, where we're looking at, we want to bring out, we've done a few collabs, we're going to keep doing collabs, but we also want to start to bring out our own Binde IPA.
Yeah.
How did you go about finding someone to work with, and what advice could you give on selecting a partner and working with a partner?
So when we were creating the brand, when we were creating the story, we had a very, very distinct idea about the direction that we wanted to go. I suppose a bit different to kind of Binde, and the fact that the craft beer industry, there are so many different styles, and I think as you go along, you will start to almost get a core style. So you'll have different IPAs or sours or gozes, which will come off with almost kind of like a central kind of flavour style. For us, the most important thing for me was that the base of the spirit needed to be, I wanted it to be a rye-based spirit rather than the neutral grain that the majority of gin distillers anyway, that they use in the industry. This comes from my days as Belgian brand manager. I love rye spirit, in whether it be a vodka, whether it be a whiskey. So for me, it's softer, it's easier to drink. So we wanted to have that coming through into the gin itself. We chose gin as a spirit because back in 2015-16, when we were developing everything, the craft gin industry, or the craft gin scene, was just about exploding. So we just felt that would, it was the easiest product for us to launch with. So we chose the distillery in Lithuania, partly because Inetta, my wife, is Lithuanian, but also at the time there weren't any distilleries working with rye spirit here in the UK. So we looked at two different distilleries within Lithuania. The one that we actually ended up going with at the time also specialised in mead, and it's something that honey, bees, nature, that's central to our brand, and what we have done, I suppose, in terms of the line extensions. And so it really made sense for us to partner up with a mead distillery within Lithuania. So they were able to really help facilitate us right at the start.
Fabulous. Mead, very big in the pagan days, but not as much these days as it once was. Is there a big mead scene these days?
It's so mead. There's evidence from, I think, 9000 BC in China of mead being brewed. So it's the oldest fermented alcohol. But in terms of meaderies in the US, it's following the craft beer scene. So 2 years ago, there was one meadery opening up every 3 days in America. It's booming around the world, and it's just in its infancy here. So you'll see a lot more people creating mead over the coming years.
So we
what's
should
the
explain.
process for creating mead? Sorry, Mike. What's the process for creating mead? Is it a distilling thing rather than a brewing thing?
No, it's a brewing thing. So it's brewing, winemaking, depending on the style. One of the things with mead is certainly in the UK it's not really an issue, but there's no legislation on what mead is. So in the US, it's a lot more regulated. So in the US, the fermentable sugars need to be at least 51% honey, and then you can add fruit, sugars, whatever to then create the mead. Here in the UK, you can have a wine base or a cider base, and then add honey and call it mead. So you get a lot of differences. There has been a move more towards the American side of things. For us, we have our own hives. We make our base, our mead from 100% honey. We do some which we ferment more like a beer, so we add hops to that one, and that's a little bit lighter. Again, it's almost like kind of a cross between an elderflower cider and an American IPA. And then we also have some wine-style ones where I'm fermenting. It's literally honey, water, yeast, and we rely on I'm going to use a geeky wine term here, but the terroir of the actual hive. So when we get really, really great honey, we'll just let it ferment completely naturally and have as minimum intervention as possible, just because we want to get those flavours of the flowers that the bees have been visiting.
It's incredible.
Mike,
I was going to chip in before and just say, can you explain what mead is? Because I think everyone's got this sense of like Robin Hood and his merry men drinking it, right? But no one actually knows what's in the pot. But I think you've done that. It's boozy honey, right? It's extraordinary. Did you just kind of learn all of this sort of by osmosis, just moving naturally from one thing to another? Because you had processed and become expert in an awful lot of stuff since we last saw you.
It's there has been method to my madness, because I started off in production. Obviously, from production you need to sell it, and so from that, retail is a very straightforward way into sales, because you have your shop, people come to visit you because they want to buy things. Then when I went to kind of flip that into the business to business, it's more challenging because you're then actively going out and trying to get the sales. From there, it just got into product development. I found it fascinating, to be honest. The fact that from a wine point of view, you could get a grape that's let's example, Chardonnay can be grown in the UK, France, Australia, and you'll get different flavours from that same grape variety. So this whole concept of terroir, where the amount of sunshine, the drainage, all these things have an effect on the flavour. So for me, I found that fascinating, and the more wines and spirits I tried, I also found that my palate, my taste in food changed as well. And I love the hospitality industry. I mean, one of the things that really, when I was growing up, I saw how much my dad loved kind of being a criminal lawyer, doing the things he did. And I always said that I wanted to be able to do a job that I loved as much as my dad loved his job. And we're dealing in something, and I think you guys are getting into this now with Bin Day in Bin Day Brewing, because you're dealing with something that makes people, as long as it's kept in moderation and you're not abusing it, it's something that makes people happy. There's camaraderie. It brings people together. It's fun.
Could I ask a question there? You mentioned that the difference between selling B2B, so business to business, and B2C, business to consumer, right? But the core of things, what makes a product sell?
You have a lot of different factors within this. Ultimately, it needs to taste good, because you can have the best branding, you can have the best marketing in the world, but if the product's awful, you'll get your first sale, but you're not likely to get kind of repeat custom. More and more packaging. Kind of packaging is important. You can see this with the gin industry now, where the amount of money that is being spent by people on specific bottles and mold, like the molds for those bottles. Some of the figures that I've heard banded about have when you take into fact design costs, the cost of the mold, the first run of the bottles, it's an investment of hundreds of thousands of pounds. So these are important because I guess in a crowded marketplace you do need to stand out. When I look at our beer selection in the shop, we often see people gravitating, say not the kind of like the beer aficionados, but people who are coming in for a beer, they do tend to go towards the labels that attract them the most. So quality of product is first and foremost, the design. Then after that, you've got the marketing side of things. And I guess from a craft distillery, and we started on our kitchen table when we were distilling here in the UK. So when you're a smaller brand, you have to try and be flexible because you don't have the same marketing fund or your kind of listing fees, adverts that the bigger boys do. So it's challenging for us. So we tend to focus more on the local market as a small craft brand than we do on wanting to be, let's say, in all the kind of the best places down in London, because we can't afford to compete in terms of price and support against the big boys. Same with supermarkets. When you go into the supermarkets, there are listing fees, there are promotional costs, there's if you want to be featured on a gondola, that's another cost, and smaller brands can't really break into that.
What challenges did you find that when you were starting out that you think we should be aware of? What are the pitfalls? What are the problems of starting out in the alcohol industry?
No matter how much you budget and you think that you need, you probably need about 50% more. There are all these little costs that you will, to be honest, as you go along, you will start to discover. Most of these, to be honest, unfortunately, you're just going to have to learn by yourselves, especially when you move and you graduate from contract distilling into, and I guess this is where you want to go to having your own brewery. One of the bits of advice I would also say is that start off, when you do start your own brewery, or even now, is have the mindset of a big company and look at putting into place all of the necessary procedures that a big distillery or a big brewery would do, just so it becomes almost second nature for you, because otherwise you then tend to, you're going to have to try and retrofit. And from our side, when we, even though we were on, we were basically distilling in our kitchen, we still made sure that we were following the same procedures that I would have done at the whiskey distillery or the cognac distillery that I was working for. Just in terms of the health and safety, in terms of the reports that we were doing, how we were monitoring everything from an HMRC point of view, all of these things. And as we've grown, it's made our life a lot easier. get used to filing as well. If there's one thing I just have to stress, the amount of filing that we do for, to make sure that we're on top of VAT, on top of HMRC, kind of duty payments, all of these things, it's all so important. HMRC, some companies have a bit of a love-hate relationship with them, but they've always been absolutely superb, very, very helpful with us. In terms of their advice and how they've suggested that we grow our business, and there's information out there.
I do find whenever I do speak to HMRC on the phone, once you get hold of someone, they're incredibly helpful people. I know they get a bad rep, but once you do get hold of a human, they're brilliant, I find.
Yeah, I think, VAT seems to be the worst one when I've been trying to get in contact with them. But in terms of, so when we move, because we export as well with our product, so when we first started, we were buying our spirit duty paid, which it made life easy for us because we weren't then having to do duty returns. But as soon as we started exporting, they suggested that we had a bonded facility, so a trade facilities warehouse, so that we could distill under bond and not pay that duty until it was created. And they were incredible at helping us to set that up, and pretty much holding our hands through the process.
In terms, so just sort of specific advice for us, if you don't mind now, and specific things. We are at the point now where, as we say, we're looking to start working towards brewing bin day IPA that we can then make a regular thing that's available, not just as a one-off, but throughout the year, if possible. What we'd ideally avoid doing is getting premises with a cold store and all that stuff. Does it sound practical? Our thinking is to try and find someone, whether it's a distributor or whatever, that will handle the product, so we can get it brewed one place, get it to the distributor, where they'll have some kind of cold store, and then send the orders out from there. Or do you think that's something that would work, or do you think that's something that has potential issues that we haven't thought of?
Are you talking about setting up your own brewery at this point, or still contract brewing?
We're talking about before we start to physically brew at other people's facilities, so contract or gypsy or cuckoo brewing or whatever it is. But then essentially what we're saying is it's a big jump from where we are now to having a physical place where the beer is stored. So we're trying to work out what the solution is to get between the contract brewing, but then not suddenly be given 50 kegs of 4,000 cans of beer that we have to put in my garage. Which obviously it's not out as well. So is there a solution, do you think, where we can work with a distributor that they will be able to handle all that sort of stuff, or is it a case that we're going to have to literally get a warehouse type thing that ourselves that we fit out with a cold store?
I think so at this moment in time, for us, and I'll use an allegory from us from a distillation point of view. So we looked at wholesalers to begin with, because the ideal model is we distill just like you would brew, and then ship it straight off to a wholesaler. And that they would do all the distribution and they pay you and everything is fantastic, and you don't really have to kind of sit on stock. But that would mean then that the wholesaler is sitting on the stock. I think at the moment as well, with just kind of coming out of the pandemic, what I've seen from wholesalers is, we're a very crowded market. The craft beer market, similar to the gin market, is a very, very crowded marketplace. So trying to get a wholesaler to commit to taking a full amount without you necessarily having trade accounts, and the majority, I would say, unless you're going to get into the supermarket, unless you're going to, unless you have and I know you have a huge following on YouTube, but unless you can get a huge amount of kind of sales to consumers, you're going to want to have that kind of the direct to business account. So for us, when we've approached bigger wholesalers, we've basically been told you either need to invest a lot of money in marketing spend, or you need to come to us with 10, 20, 30 dedicated accounts who will regularly order before they will then take us onto their portfolio. I mean, I'm sure that there's a lot of little wholesalers who would put you on, but then you're going to have to ship out smaller amounts to multiple kind of wholesalers around the country. I suppose you're almost at that kind of chicken and egg situation at the moment where you're growing. You've done more beer with the latest collaboration with S43. Has it sold out as quickly as the one from Docks?
No, not as quickly, but we've done a lot less of the marketing thing. We had like 3 videos on my YouTube channel for the first one, which obviously isn't sustainable in the long term. So no, it's sold well, but it's not going as quickly, obviously.
The best way to really start is and what we've found with Apothecary is to look at where you're strong. Whether it be Norwich, you've got it into the murderer's arms, so you can. The thing to do is to start speaking to your local. Your local pubs. You'll have to go and do the legwork yourselves, go out and get accounts. And then when you do the next run, it's about then showing those wholesalers that there is business there. The alternative, obviously, is to then, when you're choosing, let's say before you set up your brewery, and I would seriously say for the moment continue contract brewing. It may well be that you can get, if that brewer then has their own sales team, is to then do a deal for them to be also wholesaling it for you. But you'll certainly need to have that the on trade to help support your business, because trying to get people getting kegs out is going to be the quickest way to sell the beer.
And in terms of I guess the issue is, like, for us, the contract bit or the actual brewing bit, I think we won't struggle to do. It's what we physically do with the beer once it's brewed. So I guess, is it that we're going to need to hire a cold store to keep it in, essentially, or a warehouse of some sort, to get it out? I guess the question.
Again, well, this will depend on the brewery that you're working with. And the deal that you can negotiate with them, and whether or not it's a case that you for your next run you invest in you basically you buy the whole kind of run, but you get the brewery to actually store it for you and help you to distribute it. Are you speaking to wholesalers at the moment?
Understood. No, not at the minute. Because the thing is, because everything we've been doing through the brewery's web shop. So with S43 and Docks, they've handled literally everything, which means we haven't had to do anything with the licensing, we haven't had to touch the product or anything like that. But there will be, eventually, we're going to need to sell through our site, and we're going to need to start taking on the sales roles, selling into trade and stuff like that. So I guess it's that taking that stage is a bigger thing when you've then not got someone dealing with all that stuff behind you, and it becomes a lot more time consuming in that, I guess.
Yeah, but each of these breweries, they will have their own sales team as well. So it's maybe look at when you are negotiating the next brew run. Is to talk to them about the storage, to talk to them about helping you to sell the beer in. Look at this as well as something a lot more long term. So at our retail shop in Baker, we we also do a beer called Guilo. So Guilo are a Hong Kong brewery, and they don't brew over here they don't brew they brew in Hong Kong, but they don't brew to ship over here in the UK because it would take kind of 6 to 8 weeks from the moment it leaves their warehouse to clear over here. So as I'm sure you're well aware with kind of the things that you're doing, and obviously with your cold storage, as soon as that beer is made, you're on the clock to get it all sold before it goes out of date. So what they do is that they have got a partnership with Vocation in Hebden Bridge, where Vocation actually do the brewing for them. They also do a few collaborations, but Vocation produce the majority. So when I order Guilo beer, it gets delivered from Vocation. So and theirs is a long-term deal that they have. So perhaps when you're looking at let's say Binde Brewing IPA as being your core line, choose one brewery that fits with what you want from the business.
Okay, wonderful. That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it, Mike?
I think it does, yeah. It's really interesting, and it also gives you a sense of how much we still need to do. But it's exciting. It's exciting. It's all good. And the most important thing is we have mead-fueled experts who we can turn to help us with these things.
I think it's not just that. It's as well. It's contacts in the industry. There's a lot of people out there who are open and are happy to help. It's whether or not it's I can help out myself, or whether it's people that I know within the industry. There's a great camaraderie, within the brewing and the distilling world. Sometimes people can be a bit secretive, obviously, about their recipes, but there is within the craft scene, from kind of my experiences anyway, is that you're stronger together, and people help lift other people up. So there will be those people out there who can help.
Fabulous. That's been an education for us, Jim. Thank you very much for this. Mike, have you got anything to add? Anything you should know about?
No, I think Jim, you've been amazing. Thank you.
Wonderful. We'll have to come up at some point and do a bit of filming in at the distillery, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, you're more than welcome to come up. We'll get you foraging for some botanicals. We've started actually growing juniper now in the garden. But yeah, it's something where we're still very much a small distillery. We've really since opening the shop, actually, we cannot produce enough so we've had to pull back a little bit from events and local wholesaling. But yeah, you're more than welcome to come up and try the range and have a mead and gin fueled weekend.
And we should add as well. Oh, go on.
I was just going to say, where do people go, Jim, to get your fantastic products?
Well, at the moment they can go through. If physically they can come to our shop, Rebel Drinks in Bakewell. But then we sell online through our website at honeyspirits.co.uk and rebeldrinkshop.com. So that is where we are selling at the moment. And we should say that Rebel Drinks in Bakewell does, of course, stock Binde Brewing beers as well. And correct in saying you currently have Pacific Days and Atlantic Nights in stock if anyone's in the Bakewell area. And it is running out quickly. Okay, so you better go quick. it's the answer. But wonderful. So glad people are buying it. Put it that way. It's good to see that we've had a very, very good response. Ironically, as well, we did have someone in from Norwich about a week ago who was telling me about some YouTuber that he's been watching. I was very impressed to see your beers on the shelves. Oh, wonderful! Oh, well, there you go then. That's
Delightful to hear. Good that the word is spreading. Jim, thank you very much for giving up your time for us today. We look forward to seeing you soon, and everyone get over and buy some delightful mead or gin from Jim.
Great speaking to you guys.
That was great, wasn't it, Mike? Interesting chat.
Incredible. Jim has just packed so much into the last, I guess it's 20 years now, but still. I mean, he's been busy.
I've got to say, at university, he didn't seem someone who would be a success in life, if I'm totally honest. But he's absolutely smashed it, and I'm really pleased. He's got an incredible amount of knowledge about the alcohol industry, and I think we'll be relying on quite a lot for ideas and input in the coming months and years.
No, he is brilliant. As we said at the start, he's an inspiration to anyone who's wondering what to do with themselves, because I think Jim, of almost anyone we knew the least about what he wanted to do with himself when we first knew him. But he's been a lovely man the whole time, and he's still a lovely man now. So congratulations to him. He deserves it.
Absolutely magnificent. Right, Mike. What have we got coming up? Well, there's still the last few cans, as Jim was saying, is selling out in the shops as well. But the last few cans of Pacific Days and Atlantic Nights from our collab with S43 are available. You can get those online at s43brewery.com and in some bottle shops and pubs around the country. But that's your easiest way to get them. And then we're looking towards our next brew, which will be mid-October. We're heading out to Lervig in Stavanger for our first international brew, and I believe, Mike, I was about to say, our first lager.
Will be our first lager. Isn't this exciting? Yeah, a dry hopped lager. It is really interesting for us. New place, new process, and new scale as well, right? Because you've been to Lervig before, and it's a slightly different ball game. This, isn't it?
Really is, yeah, very different, but very, very much looking forward to getting out there. Wonderful. Okay, Mike, well, thank you very much for a lovely podcasting experience with you, as always, and we will be back next week with another guest, another show, and more beer-related stuff. Thanks for listening. Bye.